Good evening and welcome to our special CMI Women Better Managers Manual series, where we're discussing the 5 key themes within the manual, which is still available to download for free from the CMI Women, from the CMI website, I should say. And this week we're discussing the new employment landscape from obstacle to opportunity. And as always, we're going live to our Facebook group of CMI Women members. So please do add your comments and react so that we can see you're listening and engaging with what we're saying. And we're also going live on LinkedIn again this evening, and we'll be dipping in and out of comments and questions throughout the event on LinkedIn. So if you can start commenting saying that you're with us this evening, that'll be wonderful. CMI Women is a network that spans across regions and nations of the UK. So I'm particularly pleased this evening to be joined by 2 of our chartered fellows who are CMI Women champions in their region or nation. And I'll be welcoming Thelma Ford-Escobar, who's North East Yorkshire and Humberside, and Renee Raper from Scotland. So good evening, both.
Hi. Good evening.
Good evening. So our Better Managers Manual sets out that the effects of the COVID-19 crisis are uncertain, but they are significant. And many people and managers will find their professional circumstances altered, and many honest and sometimes difficult conversations will need to take place. So this evening we'll be discussing those 2 areas in turn, starting with Thelma on the topic of difficult conversations. And then I'll be welcoming back Renee to provide practical advice on how to turn setbacks into a springboard for new opportunities. So we'll say goodbye for now, Renee, but we'll be welcoming you back shortly. So thanks ever so much. So Thelma, kicking us straight off, what kind of difficult conversations have managers been faced with so far in this crisis? And has the move to this remote working environment made these more difficult? And what have we learned so far about how best to handle these difficult conversations?
Work and society has certainly been disrupted in a major way and will possibly remain that way for quite some time. Furloughing of staff, redeployment of staff, possibly restructuring of departments, if not full organizations, how we interact with each other going forward are certainly topics of difficult conversations right now. Has it made it more difficult to have these conversations? Yes. Remote conversations is an added factor to that already difficult situation. And I would say the added factor there is the cancelling out noise. I mean, you don't see your colleagues, you don't see your teammates, and you don't know when is the right time. You don't know how they're feeling. Are they feeling stressed? What is the circumstances like at home? So picking that right time to say, we can have this conversation now actually makes it a little bit harder. So an ideal time, place, and environment is critical. So the right communication channel is always great, but it's not necessarily available to us through remote. So I would say, yeah, those are definitely difficult situations, but also in dealing with it and how to handle it, really, we just need to be cognizant of the fact of the other person, the individual, and allow them time and space, as well as how are they going to react to what is being said to them. You know, it's not easy relating to someone online. You can't beat face-to-face conversations, I would say.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it has been incredibly difficult for many managers. And what difficult conversations do you foresee for managers in the coming months?
Some organizations have endured major setbacks at the moment due to the lockdown. So their finances have been impacted severely. Inevitably, there is going to be an end to the furloughing scheme the government has implemented, I believe around October time. So staff, teams, colleagues, everyone will be wondering, well, what's going to happen to them? Are they able to come back to their work? Will they be redeployed? what will be the circumstances for them? How are they going to be safe, really? Are downsizing going to be happening? Will organizations be choosing smaller premises? Will they be using different business models, low-cost business models, online business models? It will change for sure. But also there's the logistics of things, how to ensure everyone is safe, your customers, your staff, your employees, everyone that needs to come back to and have that face-to-face service that you provide. It's going to really cause challenges, and also not to forget some staff coming back. How are they going to be protected in case they are the vulnerable groups? And also perhaps they're shielding family members at home. So there's a lot to consider there.
And as I mentioned in the beginning, you are one of our chartered fellows, but what has your own experience of this crisis taught you about your management skills and the skills in your team?
Good question. As a leader, really, we all need to be in control of our own emotions at all times, being cognizant of our own staff, ourself, our needs. And if we're not, we're unable to demonstrate effective leadership skills, really. Leaders need to exhibit a wide repertoire of behaviors, qualities, and in terms of times like this, in particular, times of crisis, it's essential. And so for me, there's leadership models that I try to work with, really, and measure myself against, if you like. So I look at the authentic leader, really, which is really built on this is really stems from transformational leadership, which was first identified by Aviolo, and it really centers on four factors, which is being self-aware, really, and ensuring we have correct moral perspectives and balanced processing, and also relationship transparencies, which leads to the authentic leadership. Authentic leadership is all about building trust with your team. And, at the moment, there's a lot of insecurity, there's a lot of uncertainty. People are apprehensive about the whole environment, what's going on, and hence the demand for that trust to be built in an authentic leadership and demonstrate those skills. Next one I like to measure myself against is really situational leadership. And for this one, the theory and premise of this is really pretty straightforward, really. It's about a leader being able to demonstrate and adapt their skills and styles, rather, to the different situations as it presents itself. So, for example, knowing when to be supportive and knowing when to be directive. And then finally, there's adaptive leadership, really. And adaptive leadership, for this one, again, this is really, it works on three different factors, really, which is the technical challenges and adaptive, and also adaptive challenges. And then you've got your leadership behaviors that you really need to, as a leader, demonstrate, which is numbered 1 to 6 there. And then this is what leads to that adaptive working environment, really, where leader and follower interact and are able to withhold that working environment. And from this perspective, again, your followers is really your staff, your teams, your stakeholders, everyone really who you're leading. So I normally like to use these models, really, in terms of measuring my own leadership skills and assessing myself, and even in this time, really. But in terms of teams, and what skills have they got, and what have we discovered about them? I think my team is really resilient. They're very adaptable, they're flexible, they're committed, and they're strong. And I hope that they've discovered that for themselves as well, because I've certainly seen that and said that to them, but also their strong working ethic that they've demonstrated to get things going, to maintain targets. And it's particularly so for moms, really, who have had to homeschool at the same time, managing their work, managing deadlines, meeting their objectives still, and dealing with a family, maybe caring for others. So from that point of view, I think quite a lot for me has come out of my teams, and that I've discovered a lot.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And actually, firstly, just to say, hi to everybody that's watching, including Ruben from Malta. So hi to everyone that's watching. And we've had a question come through from Nandi, which I think actually speaks to the point that you were just making. So Nandi says, leaders are human too. So how can followers help leaders help them and the organization?
Yeah, leaders are absolutely human. And I think that in the first place, if leaders can demonstrate the heart, the morals, the values, the strong discipline, I think if you lead in with using those skills, your followers will be able to mirror you, pick up on that, and then there's a support between each follower and leader, really. But I think it mainly stems from the leader. If the leader can demonstrate those skills, the followers normally follow. That's what it's about, isn't it? That relationship between leadership and follower.
Absolutely, it is. And just more comments coming through, and we've got someone further afield than Malta. So Evelyn from Nigeria has joined us, as well as Tracy from London. So quite a global audience this evening. So thinking about inclusion as well, you know, and the teams that you've just been discussing, how have you ensured that people or groups of people have not been disadvantaged in the decision-making process and that their voices have been heard?
Well, we have worked diligently, really, in terms of protecting primarily our students, which is where my background, where I work. But in particular, we've had to consider the staff needs as well. So we've looked at vulnerable people. We've been very mindful of the vulnerable staff that we have had. We've looked and taken into consideration the allocation of resources, workloads allocation, objectives, deadlines, amending those, creating different strategies, really, but also being very, very flexible. I have really considered the flexibility for my teams because, again, like I said, women in particular, if they're having to multitask during the day, that's critical. I mean, you might be working from home, but you still need that flexibility. And so I have been able to adapt with different groups of people who perhaps felt I can only work at night. That's when I can be productive because I have too much distractions during the day. So I've made myself available to many of them during evenings, late evenings as well, just to support them through that, really.
And I think that does speak to the question that we've had from Darren. But you know, moving on to really discuss that issue that you were talking about, in particular, focus on women. So, if leaders and managers are to use this crisis to improve the employment landscape for women, what needs to happen and how?
To improve the landscape, really, and in particular in this time and space where we're in with what's happening, most prevalently, I would say, for women, all women, Black women, women of color, BAME women, LGBTQ plus women, neurodiverse women, disabled women, all women really need to be given that opportunity, if it's within the organization, to continue working flexibly after this scenario, if that is what suits them and would be good for them. I think that's important for them. But also, I think with the skills that my team has demonstrated, I have certainly seen some teams that can lead, and I hope that many organizations have found that with their own teams as well. But also promoting them in further up into higher areas, such as the boardroom, really, because we know very well that we need a wide representation of all people so that we can have a diverse set of skill set, diverse talents, diverse point of views, and we can represent everyone. And also it means that perhaps it brings us a step closer to gender equality, gender parity, ensuring that policies are right for everyone, they don't disadvantage anyone, but also ensuring that perhaps closing the gender pay gap as well, if there's more women up there, and just ensuring that right decision making is happening. If they can bring balance to that, that's great. And I don't think that this should be just applicable to us in the UK. We have audiences all over, and I hope that this is something that organizations all over will look at, because quite frankly, the entire world has gone into lockdown, and I hope that they've discovered those skills as well and can consider those things for women in the future.
Absolutely, and you've touched upon many, if not all, of the points that are contained within the CMI Women Blueprint for Balance, which sets out themes like pay and rewards, flexible working, promoting leadership equality that you've mentioned, and skills and careers development. We'll be talking about mentoring and sponsorship a little bit later, which is another one of the areas, and also balanced recruitment. So you know, in terms of looking ahead for the employment landscape, how important is balanced recruitment?
Absolutely in line with what I've just said, you know, about women, but also men as champions as well, for women, and sponsoring women and supporting them. So for me, it's absolutely critical. And I think that we need to ensure that recruitment process is very fair and doesn't really disadvantage anyone, in order to bring in people of a wide representation, so that we don't get groupthink. So we don't get people who simply will respond to yes, everything you say, you know, but we need people who can challenge decisions and say, well, actually, how about it this way, you know, and we can learn from each other. So I think that that is critical. Yeah.
So we've had a comment from Tracy saying that this is preferential to transactional leadership, much more employee engagement this way. I just wonder whether you could very, you know, quickly and simply explain, you mentioned earlier transformational leadership, and now Tracy's talking about transactional. What is the difference between the two?
Yeah, well, really, transactional is really about contracts, if you like to put it simply that way. So I pay you, you give me the work that I've asked for. So it's more about just reward and benefits, really. It's a direct, straightforward, get it done, you get this. Bonuses, for example, hit your targets and you reach bonuses. It's very transactional, it's very straightforward. I prefer transformational leadership because it's where authentic leadership stems from, and it's building relationships with people. But obviously, in terms of sales, maybe different businesses, you might find that transactional leadership is more appropriate. And of course, these models are all out there for us to be able to pick and choose the ones that suits the environment we're in, the work we're in, who we are, you know, so they're there for a guide, really. So I'd recommend try as many as you possibly can and see what works for you.
Great. And I know we'll be bringing you back a little later after I've had a discussion with Renee. But first, you talk there about resources and, you know, those who might be interested in this subject matter. Well, what would you recommend?
I would recommend you go onto CMI Direct. As a chartered manager, I have always looked forward to using these, and I also in particular look forward to the new newsletters that comes in on a weekly basis with learning and development. Absolutely critical, useful tips. So yeah, definitely I would strongly recommend the use of those literature. They're very, very useful for everyone, really, from first-time leaders to middle management, senior leadership. There's something for everyone there, and for women, how to, you know, have conversations, how to negotiate, how to upskill yourself. It's all there, really. So I'd strongly recommend it. Use it.
Great. Well, thanks ever so much for saying that. It's very kind of you.
Thank you.
And
I do use them.
well, as I say, we'll be reintroducing you a little later. But perhaps for now, if I could reintroduce Renee, and we'll be looking more at turning setbacks into a springboard for new opportunities. So welcome back, Renee.
Thank you.
So kicking us straight off, so beginning with managers who might be looking to redeploy or reskill their teams for future business needs, how might they best go about doing this?
Okay, well, I always start with 4 questions if I'm coming in to see a manager, which I think are really good for managers, but they're also good for followers to talk to the leaders about. So the first one would be, so is it business as usual? Not really at the moment, I don't think. So the next following question, if the answer is no, then is it people as usual? So are staff working the same as usual? No, certainly not again in these times. So the third question then, so is it leadership as usual? And hopefully they should then follow on that, well, no, it's not business as usual, not people as usual, so it shouldn't be leadership as usual. So the next question is, so, okay then, what should we be doing? What should we be doing better? What should we be improving on? So it automatically takes you to a gap analysis. So you're looking at, well, what did we do beforehand? What are we doing now? And where should we be in the future? What's the things that we're going to need? And there you have your development need in the middle. So once you've got your development need, then you need to plan, discuss with your staff, with your team, agree actions, agree goals, agree timescales, and then basically give them the time and space and support to get on and do it. If you can ring fence an hour or so a week, certainly if people are furloughed, or I know people who spent a lot of their time traveling between clients, but because they're not doing that now, they have, I feel loath to say extra time, but if you could actually use that every week to develop some of the skills that you've found in the gap, then I think that's a good idea. And I think we need to remember that learning and development isn't just going on a course. So I'm sure a lot of the viewers, listeners, CMI out there will have heard of the framework, the 70-20-10 framework. So in that, they're saying that only 10% actually of our learning and development comes from formal courses. 70% is actually on the job, and 20% comes from mentors, from coaches, from line managers, from peers. So there's lots that we can do. It's not, have you had any training? No, I haven't been on a course, which is often the way people look at it. And I think all managers should be looking at their, as Thelma was saying, looking at their change management, their transitional skills, and remembering that the well-being of their team is most important.
Absolutely. And that's really interesting. So you've touched on a couple of things there that I think we could pull out a little bit. In terms of, obviously it is a crisis, you've quite clearly said that. And for those perhaps who don't have that level of support from their managers, is it actually possible during a crisis to scan the horizon for what skills, needs and career opportunities lie ahead?
Well, I'm afraid I don't have a crystal ball, and it would be good if we do. But I think we can look around and see some things. Certainly, if you're in your sector, you've probably got an idea of the way your sector's developing. In CMI, I've done quite a lot of work with looking at how AI is going to, and automation is going to actually affect the workplace. And their Management 4.0 is very much looking at how the skills, how we need new skills and how we'll work them. And with the crisis now, CMI have got their thought leadership management transformed. Again, with pointers as the type of things and type of skills that will help us whichever sector we're in. So the CMI research is saying things like empathy, agility, and effective communications are skills that are going to be in great need now and in the coming years or coming time. And it's actually CIPD actually brought out some research as well recently, and they're more or less saying the same things, that now people are looking more at behavioural skills, values-based skills, which is looking, going back to what Thelma's just been speaking about and other people, it's moving from the transactional side to the authentic, that type of leadership. And emotional intelligence is very much out there as well as something for people to understand and use. So I think, there's all these things there, and I resounding in my ears all the time is something that I was told, is that, well, if you can't lead yourself, you can't lead others. So I feel that we ought to be developing leadership in ourselves as well, whatever level we are in an organisation.
Well, that's really interesting, because actually we've had a comment come through from Evelyn, and Evelyn's saying, prior to the pandemic, a lot was said about the future of learning and the responsibility of development shifting from the organisation to individuals. Is that still applicable, seeing that organisational needs have rapidly changed in a short time during the crisis? And I know, one of the questions I wanted to ask you that perhaps is related to that is, just how important is learning and development?
Well, I'm a learning and development professional, so of course I'm going to say it's very important. But I think it is, and CMI research as well shows that certainly professional management qualifications are very helpful when they're looking at promotion and employability. So, certainly I feel that there is a lot that we should be taking responsibility for. So I'm a great advocate that we should all be T professionals. So I don't know if you've come across this term before, but when we start our careers, we go into a job, we very much learn all the functional, technical skills. So these are the things that we're actually doing, we're producing, we're making. These are our firm base that we build on. But nowadays, we actually need broader skills, so hence the T on top. So we're actually looking at more wider skills across the organisation. I don't know if we could see the next slide, please. Thank you. So these are interpersonal skills. These are understanding other people, communicating better, maybe even understanding how the organisation is working better. And I really feel very strongly that we should all strive to be a T professional. And it fits with CMI's accidental managers as well, because many a time we're good at what we do. We're a good teacher, we're a good nurse, we're good in hospitality. So we're made managers, but we're not given the skills often to lead people and manage people. So we're a manager by accident. So I think we should be actually embracing this and becoming T professionals ourselves. And the other thing I think I would like to say is that we all know about CPD, which is continuing professional development. The important word there, I think, is continuing. So the fact that we went on a course and we did something 5 years, 10 years ago, it gets out of date. We were talking about leadership skills there. Now, yes, we're talking about more ethical leadership, servant leadership, and emotional intelligence. They're all things that now we ought to be looking at and exploring. So there's always room for developing ourselves.
There's a really interesting conversation going on in comments on the LinkedIn stream, actually. So thanks ever so much for discussing these issues as we're talking. Yashinur is a student and was asking about, in group works, sometimes we find people difficult to work with, and how can we handle those situations? And I think kind of a lot of what we've already discussed this evening can be applied to that kind of situation, but is there a particular approach you might take, Renee?
Well, I think very much that there are different people, and people we find difficult because they think differently, they act differently to what we do. And so it's trying to understand. So that's where the emotional intelligence side's coming out, to try and understand, see it from their side and try and work with them, as opposed to, that's I can't get on with this. This isn't what I think about. So I do think there's something to start doing there. And there are resources that you can go on to learn ways and things that you could actually do to help, conversations that you could have, going back to what we were talking about earlier, so that you can both understand why there's this difficulty happening.
Absolutely. And being a CMI Women event, there does seem to be some research findings that are suggesting that some women feel there are barriers to learning and development right now. So what are your thoughts on how to overcome these?
Well, yes, I mean, I really do empathise with women and trying to develop and hold down a job and all the rest of it. I think there's two main barriers I feel. Main one is time and money, possibly. So for time, if I can just give you an example, I have two daughters who I'm encouraging to continue with their qualifications and training. And one of them has got two-year kids. So at the moment, she's homeschooling. She's trying to hold down the job. She's doing all the other things that mums do as well. And there just, isn't time at the end of the day, or she's too exhausted then to carry on with the studying. So, hoping when the rules change that, we might be able to share the load and help her out a bit. And I know there's a lot of you out there probably wouldn't be able to have those arrangements either. So it is hard. I think if you try and make use of the online courses, it needn't be a formal course. If taking part in in webinars like this, reading online, certainly doing stuff online that you can do at a time that suits you, at a place that suits you. I've heard of people sort of disappearing into the bath to do it, although I don't think I trust myself with my laptop in the bath. And also at a pace. So people learn at different paces. So I think that's most important.
Absolutely.
Moving on to the money side, formal courses can be expensive. I know, because I've been pricing some recently for myself. But there are lots of other things. Going back to the learning and development is more than courses. So we can look at coaching and mentoring, which you briefly mentioned earlier, Matt. Mm-hmm. Which again, CMI have found out doing research that they're really important. These are getting role models to help women move up into the leadership positions. So have a look in your network. Who have you got? Who do you know? Get in touch with them and say, would you be my mentor? Can you help me? Could you coach me through some of this? I mean, what's the worst they could say is no. And I don't really think that people want to say no. We all want to try and help people out and share any knowledge and skills that we've got. And the other thing I think you briefly mentioned is sponsorship. Now, that's not really learning and development. But again, coming back to CMI, they've done research and it's proved to be a statistical benefit of 30% on pay and promotion if you actually have a sponsor. And who mainly has the sponsors? These are the men. So come on, women, we need to find ourselves a sponsor. So what is a sponsor? A sponsor actually is somebody who is in the room. And I know this is all virtual now, but if you can't be in the room, then know somebody who can be in the room, who could put you forward. So there's opportunities. They can say, well, there's nobody here, but let's give Renee a chance. She could be able to do this. And I think that's really important. And in my life, my career, I certainly think of two straight away who've been very helpful like that. And it's been invaluable. So if we're looking at ways of good ways of learning and development, if you remember that a coach asks you, a mentor will tell you, and a sponsor will sell you. So come on, let's have one of each, or just one of the three. That would really, I really think make a difference.
Absolutely. And I know we want to obviously talk a little more. We are slightly going over, but hopefully everyone doesn't mind staying with us a little longer this evening. So obviously I've certainly found it fascinating, and I know there's a couple more questions I would like to ask. And so please do take this opportunity as well, if you're watching, to ask any live questions before we start moving towards the close of the event. But you mentioned yourself, Renee, and you've actually used the opportunity to start your journey to becoming a chartered management consultant with us. So why did you decide to do this, and what have you learned so far that's helped during this crisis?
Well, I've moved out of an organisation about a year ago and started my own consultancy. So I felt there was 3 reasons, really. First of all, I needed to make sure that my skills were up to date, that I could provide a quality service. So I needed to check on that and find out the latest ideas and models that could be used. Secondly, I felt I needed to formalise what learning skills I thought I had, and that would give my clients comfort, or I was formalising my experience so that they knew that they could have trust in me, that I could do the job. And thirdly was the fact that as a learning and development professional, if I wasn't doing any myself, I don't think that was very good. So I really felt that I had to show that I could walk the talk as well. I have to say that I was before the pandemic, the year before, I actually was made redundant, and it hurt. It hurt a lot. It felt very personal, although everybody told me it wasn't personal. It was very demoralising, and it made me very angry as well. So I think there must be quite a few people now in this situation, people that I talk to, who find now that they're being made redundant as well. And we can't turn the clock back at all. So try and look out for opportunities so that you can develop yourself, find a coach and a mentor so that you can move forward and try and use it as an opportunity, rather than just think, it's a closed door. And the one thing that I found when I moved out, and also all through the pandemic, is to nurture your networks. Your networks are so important. And so to keep in touch with them, find out what they're doing and develop them. It's not a case of how many people have you got on your LinkedIn, how many connections. It's not a race, it's the quality of the ones that you've got.
Absolutely. And again, similar question to Thelma, where would you recommend kind of further resources for people interested on this topic?
Well, I love Management Direct, so I go in there all the time. It's great. It's easy to find. If I want a checklist, or if a methodology, or finding out what the latest research is. So at the moment, I'm working with the financial sector, looking at organisational culture. So that was my first point of call. Go in and let's find out everything that's on Management Direct. So try it. You should do. It's really good.
Great. Thanks ever so much. And interestingly enough, we had a comment from Gareth saying that he's also interested in the chartered consultant route. So found that all very interesting, great information, and says thank you to Renee. And an interesting comment from Tracy saying, when will we start to see being a chartered manager as a criteria for job selection? Certainly, I think that's something that CMI would support. So great comment from Tracy there. We did actually receive a comment ahead of the event as well, which I think is relevant to the conversation that we've been having and that Thelma and I had as well. Someone was saying that they need a mentor and an organisation to develop their managerial volunteering. So really, I just want to highlight that CMI Women members do have access to a whole range of support, including the Careers Development Centre, which is something we've not mentioned this evening, but is a one-stop shop full of resources for your career development, and also mentoring. So I know that we have talked about the power of mentoring, and I actually personally went on this evening and set up a profile, and took less than 20 minutes. It's all very straightforward. And so I highly recommend the CMI women members that are watching to make sure that they are registered onto the mentoring platform. And as Renee said, let's make sure we get some of these strong connections and networks built in the coming days and weeks ahead. I'd just like to bring back Thelma as well, but thank you ever so much, Renee, and you'll be staying with us. And I just wanted to say thank you as well to Thelma. We've had some great comments coming through. We've got one from our CMI women group saying the adaptation to the new work environment, including multitasking, is all-encompassing CPD. For many of us, this is not the time to take on even more, but to focus on leading our staff through this period, and being what our families need is leading enough in itself at this time of high workload. So I think to some extent, Renee, does that speak to your point about 70-20-10, the fact that actually this kind of managing through a crisis, leading through the uncertainty, that's a significant CPD in itself?
Well, yes, it is, because it's still the skills that you're going to use. So it's certainly very important to do that.
Absolutely. And Thelma, I just wondered if you had any comments on the second half of the discussion with Renee's tips and points. Is mentoring and sponsorship, has that had a positive impact in your own career?
It certainly has. I have had diversity coach in my career, and it's proven to be very, very useful in rebuilding my confidence, because sometimes you do lose it. It's in the daily grind of work, you sometimes do lose that confidence. So I'd strongly recommend that. But I also like what Renee's point on in talking about redundancy, because that will resonate with a lot of people right now. So I think that's a really useful piece of information there as well, to stay strong, really, to all women out there and everyone who has had the misfortune to be in this position. Stay strong, really, and stay positive and learn, indeed, and widen your skills so that you become more of a generalist and you open up yourself to more opportunities. Put yourself in place of opportunities rather than feeling too upset for too long. It's just, one of those things that we have to try and move on from.
Absolutely. And I very much appreciate you both joining us this evening and giving up your evenings. And actually, it's probably worth mentioning that you are volunteers for CMI. So, you on a regular basis do share your management expertise and help others. So for the person that was looking for mentoring and volunteering opportunities, then there are lots of opportunities to get involved especially at the regional and national level, I'm sure. And looking forward to seeing more work and working with you more closely on those projects as well. In terms of there has been a question come through around specific advice for startups. I think, we are drawing to a close this evening. I just wondered if perhaps that's something that you might have a quick tip for, or whether perhaps we take that offline and respond to Joe after the event. But do you have any advice on someone thinking about starting this journey? Is there any specific startup advice? You also considering issues that Joe faces as a working mother. Sorry, the comment was moving around a little bit as I was trying to read that. But I think we've got Joe, a working mother who's thinking of starting this journey, and what are the first steps to potentially either a career as a consultant or self-employed?
For either of us, is this?
I think if you have any tips, obviously it's the end of the evening, so I won't hold you too long, Renee. But
oh dear, right. Well, just really try and sit down and work out a plan. What you want to do. Well, certainly what your skills are, what you want to do, and then how are you going to approach it? And it will sort of grow by then. Sorry, I'm being very woolly here, but obviously I've gone through it. So
no, okay.
I mean, I'd be more than happy to pick it up afterwards and give Jo some tips as to if it can help her.
Great. So Joe, we'll try and be in touch after the event. So Thank you ever so much, both. And I just wanted to really say that this brings us to the end of the CMI Women Better Managers Manual series. We've covered off all 5 themes. We've had all amazing speakers giving their time on these Wednesday evenings to talk to us. So I would like to say thank you to all of them, including Thelma and Renee. This Friday afternoon, our CEO, Anne Frank, will be joined in conversation by Alicia McCaffrey, who is Interim Director at the Government Equalities Office. Anne will be speaking to Alicia about how we can harness recovery from a government and policy perspective, so not one to be missed by CMI Women members. And we also have our regular podcasts. Most recently, we had a fascinating conversation with Tony Wilson, the director of the Institute for Employment Studies, as part of our Managing Through Change series. And that really did dig down into some of the data that we've been talking about tonight around potential unemployment levels and changes to the economy. So highly recommend that podcast for those that are interested in what might lie ahead. And you've heard from both of our guests this evening about Management Direct. So for members, please do head to Management Direct and take a look at some of the excellent resources that we have on both aspects of the new employment landscape, both the handling difficult conversations and also the removing obstacles to create opportunities that we discussed as well this evening. And if you're not yet a member, if you're watching us on LinkedIn and you're not yet a member, I would just call you to the CMI Women website. It is for the price of a cup of coffee and cake a month. You can have access to our mentoring, the career development ladder. And so there's lots and lots of resources. And I would highly recommend that you take a look at the CMI Women website. But we're having some great comments and lots of our audience thanking both Renee and Thelma. So it just leaves me to say thank you ever so much both, and good evening to everybody.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening.